So friends, we are here today for our candid conversation. This time our author is none else than Aman Singh Maharaj. Aman Singh Maharaj, right? So he's Aman also. Now when you juxtapose Aman and Singh, it's very interesting, because Aman and Singh and then Maharaj. So we have three very interesting terms juxtaposed in his name. And he's going to be talking to us about his, what I call it, an intergenerational, intercontinental book, because it's a book which spans continents, it's a book which spans generations, and we have with us for discussion Deepika Bhushan. Deepika has been I wouldn't say an old friend of ours, but she's a friend of ours, because we've done a session here earlier with Bhupendra Yadav that was on the rise of BJP, and we hope that that we'll continue to engage with her. So, very briefly, this is a group of people who are fond of reading, fond of writing, and that's why we are here. It's a purely voluntary get-together. And we have some of our volunteers, our guests from Antara, some of our regular guests, and some people might just drop in from the Usha colony. So what the format would be that, I'll just tell you something about this book, and then we'll tell Aman to give a few opening remarks, and then Deepika can be in conversation with him for about half an hour, 40 minutes. And then those of you who've been to Africa or who want to go to Africa can ask him questions about the thing. So friends, as you're all aware, there has been a lot of migration. In fact, the moment you talk of South Africa, one of the first things that comes to mind is Mahatma Gandhi. What comes to mind is Mahatma Gandhi, what comes to mind is Nelson Mandela, what comes to mind is their cricket team, what comes to mind, there's so many things, and yet it's a society in which there's a lot of discontent, there's a lot of violence, there's a lot of angst, there's a lot of suffering, and whenever there's a lot of suffering, it finds various ways of expressing itself. Those ways could be deviant behavior, those ways could be our own interpersonal actions with each other. So that's an exploration which he's doing. And the remarkable thing about this book is that it's not a sob story. It's not a story which is a sob story. It's a story in which the protagonist is a normal young man who has his follies, he has his foibles, he has his aspirations, he has his lust, he has his frustrations. There are many things happening to this young man who drawn from somewhere, probably your own life, I don't know. But anyway, with these few words, I think, Aman, you can talk about your book, I think, and then Deepika can start, and then I'll jump in, and then we can continue our conversation. Over to you, Aman, but before that, a big round of applause. He's here and he'll be happy to sign these copies at what, 50% discount? Or?
No, I'm giving it.
Giving it? Okay, wonderful. The copies are for all of us. Oh, wonderful. You must come more often.
That's like authors are paupers.
Great. So, over to you.
So, thank you, everyone. My name, as he said, it's Aman. You all probably know it means peace. I think I am synonymous with what my name is, except when I have to talk, I can become quite controversial. I've been told to be not so candid, but he said I can be candid. It is a candid conversation. I am probably third generation Indian on my maternal side, and on my paternal side, I'm fourth generation. So we are these group of Indians that left India, or were deceived into leaving India, round about from 1860. It actually started with Mauritius first, which was 1838. And living under the British Raj, life was pretty tough. Slavery had just ended, and the British had all these colonies, but they had no labor. So they needed a cheap form of labor. Slavery is over, so they came up with this thing called indenture, which was a bonded form of slavery. It was not any different. And there were agreements signed between the laborer and the masters, whichever country they went to. And this was called an agreement, but because being an Indian, we couldn't say the word agreement, it was called girmit. And we became known as girmityas, right, which has a lexical equivalent in English. We came mainly from the areas of UP in the north and Bihar. In those days, it was called the United Provinces of Agra and Oud. Oud was a shorter Ayodhya, I never knew that. Bihar was then part of the Bengal presidency, right? There was no Bihar as such. And from the south, they came from the Madras presidency, which is now split into Tamil Nadu, where I think
Tamil Nadu, Karnataka.
no, but they didn't come from Karnataka. They came just from Tamil Nadu area, and then the Telugus came from obviously from Andhra Pradesh, which is now split into Telangana and Andhra Pradesh. And then about maybe 10, 15 years later, the Gujaratis followed, but as businessmen coming from Gujarat. So they came as passenger Indians, whilst the rest of us were indentured laborers coming to work in the sugarcane fields. It was nothing fantastic. Our beginnings are humble, but we came. I don't believe in caste, but we came from different castes, from different, whether it was from Brahmin to Rajput to Vaishya to Shudra. It was practiced. Caste was practiced in terms of marriage for, I would say, 140 years. So from 1860 right up to the 1990s, people generally married within their own caste and within their own linguistic groups as well. But I think as kids started to study away from home, and then they started to shack up before marriage and stuff like that, all that went away. So we have the intercaste marriages, we have some level of interlinguistic marriages, but within the same religion of Hinduism. In terms of cross-religious marriages, for example, Muslim Hindu or Muslim Christian, it does happen, but not as prevalent. So we still, I won't say we're stuck in our village mentality, but we haven't changed as much as modern India has changed in terms of our socialization, when I call it that. Whether it's a good thing or a bad thing, I hold no judgment on anyone for what they think. I'm an engineer, a civil engineer, MBA, and then I did a PhD in economics, and then I don't use any of my qualifications. I'm a businessman, and you have to earn money somewhere, because you don't earn money out of giving books for free. I think you only make money as an author if you win some sort of prize, or you write pulp fiction. My book is far from pulp fiction. If I may be a bit arrogant, I would say, in my mind, I'd like to think of it as literature. And it goes back to those days when people wrote sweeping novels that traversed, centuries and different generations of families, and maybe even different continents, which is what my book does. So essentially, it's about a character. Apartheid has ended in South Africa. He's an Indian guy, and he's about 32, unmarried, and everyone is euphoric. South Africa is now the rainbow nation. We had a bloodless revolution, and but he's upset. He's feeling dislocated. He's feeling lost, and he starts to get these signs and nudges from the universe. And whilst there's a logical part of him, there's a part of him that's looking for something to hold on to. And he gets these nudges to go to India to find himself, which is a cliche. But I assure you, the story itself, as it unpacks, if I may be so bold to say it's not cliche itself, it's not a sob story, as Bhaji has said. It's quite a raunchy story as well. I think if you're under 18, think twice about reading it, so keep it away from your kids. But it's done within the fulcrum of philosophy as well. So there's a lot of philosophy underneath it. And there's a fair amount of misogyny. He's a misogynistic character. And people ask me, did I write about myself? No, I didn't. He's very short and uneducated. I did that deliberately so people would not assume that I'm the character. But they still ask me, oh no, you just made him short just for the sake of, because you don't want people to think it's you. I think every author writes something about himself, in not just one character, to every character. Even if a person writes fantasy, you find bits and pieces of them in the story, but you put it on steroids, because I don't think my life itself is exciting enough to become a story. It's all about how you craft the tale, that's what it is. So he goes to India, going from city to city, looking for sex, love, lust, whatever comes his way, and a guru. And then he's traveling up the Ganges, going to his ancestral villages, and has certain ethereal experiences along the way. I'm not going to go into that, but I think that's a good enough précis of what the novel is about.
So great. I think Deepika, over to you for your first question, and then I'll join.
Thank you, Aman. It's been a long journey of our own. two of us have been working on this book together to promote it here in India for the last 1.5 to 2 years now. And we've had several conversations about the book, about the character, about his flaws and the entire journey, the spiritual journey that he takes. Thank you for the brief and starting by giving that brief about the history of South Africa and the Indians who, I think were not, they didn't travel by will, but were forced to travel to South Africa. It was about over a century ago. So let me begin my first question about the shared history. India was under the colonial influence. South Africa was under the colonial influence for much longer than India, and I think they got their freedom only in the 90s, which was much later.
1994.
Yeah.
In fact, just to tell the younger people, earlier when we got our passports, it used to say that valid for all countries except Israel and South Africa. So you would have, the millennials would not have seen such passports, but I'm sure some of us have seen those passports.
Yes.
And South Africa, in fact, visiting South Africa was something which was, because everybody went to Uganda, because you had a lot of Indians in Uganda, a lot of Indians in Nigeria, a lot of Indians in Namibia, but South Africa was South Africa, and the South African cricket team was quite a legend.
Yes.
Absolutely. Yeah. So, and since there's so much of shared history between the two countries, how do you view, if we talk especially about the Indians who moved there? There have been other people from other countries who also moved into South Africa. How do you view the social setup and engagements there in South Africa and now in India? Almost like after 40 years of your independence and of almost like 75 years of our independence, that you very briefly mentioned, but I would like you to share more about that aspect, because I feel that will give a lot of context to the conversation ahead and the journey of Milan as he gets back to India and takes that journey right from Calcutta to Varanasi.
So, if I look at, I've been coming to India since 1981. So this is probably, I think, my 16th or 17th visit to India. So
it was when South Africa wasn't.
Yes, it was.
So you were allowed to travel to India?
We were, but not directly. We had to come via Nairobi. We had to stop in Nairobi and go to a place called Aden, which is in Syria. But Aden is a port city that I think India had something to do with Aden.
Actually, Aden was a part of the Bombay presidency.
That's it, yeah.
And the governor of Bombay used to manage Aden. It was only around the early part of the last century that Aden got, and Ambani made all his fortune there.
Okay, all right. So you're very knowledgeable to know about something that's curious at that. So we had to come via the buyer to come to India. Even to get literature, whether it was the Bhagavad Gita, we had lots of pundits in South Africa. To get literature from India, it couldn't come directly because of sanctions imposed by India against the white man. It was also the Indian guys who also experienced side effects of that in terms of not having access to immediate culture and so forth from India. So everything had to come via Uganda or Mozambique and enter illegally into the country. So we had access, but in a very indirect way. In a sense, I think if you look at the middle class in India and the middle class of South Africa, in as much as I may have a more Western look, my mannerisms are Western, I think a lot of me is still very conservative, especially when it comes to my own family, as compared to what the middle class is here. For example, in my mother's generation, she was born in 1939. When we first came to India, well, she's been coming earlier to India, but when I came in 1981 and we saw middle-class Indian women drinking, it was a bit of a shock. Indian women don't do that in South Africa in 1981. They only started doing it 20 years later. So in a sense, if I can call that an evolution, that evolution or social degeneration, I don't know whatever term works, came 20 years later to us. there's certain rituals that we still practice, almost out of fear. For example, you would wonder why is an educated man, 2 or 3 degrees in the cities in South Africa, still doing, animal sacrifice prayers to Mother Kali. Yet, this is what I found when I come to the cities in India, it's not really practiced, it's been done away with in villages. So that kind of evolution has not happened. We're very ritualistic. The Pandits, they have not learned. I myself come from a Pandit family. But my father and his forefathers, and I trace them back 10 generations, they didn't have the philosophical background to the rituals that we were doing. And it only changed when the Arya Samaj came into South Africa, and then people started to understand. I can go on and on, so I'm not going to.
So one part of social setup is the faith that people practice and the rituals that you talked about, but the other part of it, and a very important part, is language. How has that evolved?
So up to the baby boomers are those born, I think, 1940s and 1950s.
1960, I guess it was normally yes, after the World War.
After the World War. They spoke the vernacular. I was forced to go to Hindi school after school because I came from a traditional family. But I can't, if I speak Hindi, I sound ridiculous. I sound like a class 1 kid speaking Hindi. But I can understand. So that died out. In terms of language, the way they spoke the language also developed its own nuances in each region that they went to. So the indentured laborers went to Fiji, Mauritius, Natal, which is South Africa. They went to Trinidad, and they went to Suriname and British Guyana. They all developed their own local version of Bhojpuri. And in my opinion, a lot of it when they spoke, when they sang, it sounded horrible. It sounded very guttural because they didn't know sometimes what they were saying. Or it developed the local twang, and it just didn't sound, there was no soul, for example, to the singing. I think you listened to my presentation when I showed some of it, and we lost those traditions of being dancers or doing the Ram Leela. It used to be done until the 1960s. Or that ability to, for example, build temples. There's lots of temples in South Africa, but it was originally done by the people from South Africa. But now we have to import labor from India to build temples. People still do it, but we don't have the inherent talent to do it.
So what you're saying is architectural abilities and these craftsmanship was something that went away, which we lost in the process.
Any sort of talent except having the brain power went away. In terms of becoming engineers, doctors, I would say
that's the same middle class trajectory that you find here. And in fact, as far as languages go, last year one of the books which was shortlisted was called Emperors, Kings and Merchants, and that's about how languages evolve, and how creoles come up, because what was happening was that it was becoming very, very functional. I mean, the relationships, say, in a plantation industry, where you have a lot of indentured labor, virtually another name for slaves, and the master. So the language was becoming very, very functional. So when you have a functional language, it is like a creole, which is not a real language. A real language is one which has a grammar and a noun, and which has a certain structure. A creole is a very functional thing, like you have, like the way the Bombaya Hindi type. I mean, even worse than Bombaya Hindi, because aata hai, jata hai, like the way, some of the name staff would address their Indian people. But again, just to share with you that when you go to Fiji, for instance, or when you go to Suriname, where the population is mixed, that is, you have Africans and Indians, but not too many Europeans, or the Europeans have left. There, the way life evolved is very different than it happened in South Africa. Because in South Africa, the Greys and the Dutch and the Africans, they just stayed there. Whereas in Fiji and Suriname, I mean, I don't know about Mauritius, but certainly in Fiji and Suriname, this is how it evolved. So therefore, all these migrations by nature, led to a very different kind of situations in all these things. And I think that is the value of Aman's book. It shows us how how things evolve there, you know, and how expectations. I mean, how do you handle your expectations when you are far away? And the image that you build about Mother India, you know, the image that you build about your country when you are far away. You know, when you're living in a place, you don't, I mean, even when people come from outside to Dehradun, they say, "Arey, Dehradun was like this, aisa tha, aisa tha." We are here, so we are seeing the Sastadhara road change in front of our own eyes. We've seen how these trees in front of the cafe went. We've seen it. It's happened before us. But we've also seen a new road come up. We've seen many new things come up. So for us, it's a very gradual change. It's sort of built in. But suddenly, if somebody was to come to Dehradun or go to Bangalore or go to Delhi after 20 years, I mean, the shock and the thing is far more intense. So I think that's what was happening to your main your protagonist when he came to India.
And probably that was the reason, I mean, in fact, that brings me to that question of what inspired Milan and what inspired Aman to take that journey backward. With a disconnect of generations in your case. Let's start with your own journey. What inspired you to get back to go looking for your roots in India?
I think to become a writer, now I'm talking about a writer of serious literature. I'm not talking about, pardon me for saying that, I'm not talking about chick lit, I'm not talking about pulp fiction or mysteries. They all have their own place, and fantasy and so forth. You have to have suffered a little bit, and all of us have suffered. I tend to romanticize my suffering. Oh, I was the eldest son. I came from a well-to-do family, and then we lost it, and then I had to make sure as the eldest son, I had to be there. I couldn't leave the city. With my qualifications, I should have been, for example, in London, working in Canary Wharf, in the banking sector, living the time of my life. But here I am, fourth generation Indian. I'm choosing those Indian values to stay at home, look after the family, look after the siblings, and so forth, and not to make myself a martyr, because martyrdom can never be self-proclaimed. But I came from the generation, or I represent that generation where we were prepared to self-sacrifice for the betterment of society. So I think that brings about a certain degree of sadness. Although it does, people don't see it in me because I have a gregarious face and I talk, very openly and loudly at times. But there is inherent sadness, and that kind of compels you to put that onto paper. But at the same time, you've got to twist it and hype it up. So if there's 50% sadness, then you want to bring that to 80% to make it that more guttural when you're reading. It must hit you in the gut when you read it. And I think I've had people phoning me and crying. Sometimes it was feminists getting upset and saying, how can you write a book like this? And then I would get people crying because they love the prose so much, because it goes so deep into the person, the very nexus of his soul. And I used to get very upset when I should write some of the words. So I think if it brings about that kind of, emotion in people, I'm not saying it's everyone, it's not everyone's cup of tea, then, as I wrote each word, in the words of Paul Bunyan when he wrote Pilgrim's Progress, I didn't have to think about it. I think I had a natural talent for writing. So as each word was typed out, the next one came. I didn't need to plan it, I didn't need to do a mind map. So I guess we're all born with some sort of talent, and maybe that was mine, and when the time was right, and I had the time, it just came out.
So just one question. When you thought of this book, all the women that you have in this book, starting from the IFS lady who was sitting with you in the flight, to all the academic girl, and the women in the Wet Street of Calcutta, you knew about all the women they were to write about, but they also appeared as you started writing them, or what happened?
Look, some of the experiences are drawn from.
Okay, let's stop.
Yeah.
I think everyone understands when you say that. So that's I shared all you that will give you a reason to read this book. Because one thing I must warn you, see, when a book is given free, it must be respected. It must be respected. So do not read the book because it's been given to you free, of course. So maybe 3 events from now, I'll do a little quiz amongst all of you about what all happened in this book, and then I'll give you a prize. It will be yet another copy of this book. Okay. sorry.
So Amit, let's start with the journey of Milan from Calcutta. What and why was Calcutta important in this story? I would like you to share that with us.
So, those of us who came from the United Provinces, which is or UP now, and from the Bengal Presidency or Bihar at that time, and we had to leave via the river port of Calcutta. So, 160 years. My father's side came from Allahabad or Prayagraj, what it's called now. My mother's side came from Jalan, which is a district just above Jhansi. Everyone knows Jhansi Kirani, which was the Bundelkhand area. It was where I think Pulandeli came from. It was a bit of a wild, dacoit kind of area. In those days, prior to 1890, there was no railways. So they walked, for example, from Geelong, you had to walk, they didn't even put them on ox wagons. They walked 1,200 kilometers to Calcutta. It was only around about the 1890s that they started having trains. And like, I think Shashi Tharoor has said, those trains were not built to give Indians access to better infrastructure. It was to move goods faster to England. And in our case, to move your indentured laborers faster to whichever colony it had to be. So Calcutta does hold a special place in my heart because that's where my forefathers left. And when I first went there, I did a small prayer. I tend to do my puja or my rituals quite often, but I underpin it by philosophy and I twist it to fit into what I believe works as well. So if you go to the Hooghly River, which is a distributary of the Ganga, so it is somewhat holy. I figure that my grandfather or my great-grandfather would have dipped first in the Hooghly before he left, just out of sentiment alone. Because you don't know where you're going. Some of them thought they're going to Mauritius and then they ended up in South Africa. Some thought they're going to Guyana and then they ended up in Mauritius. So they never knew. People were separated, families were separated. So, and what happened on the ship itself was horrible. They were raped by the British soldiers. And the proof of that was 9 months later, Indian women had blonde, blue-eyed babies, and the husbands had to just suck it up and live with it. So the second part as to why Calcutta is because the Ganga ends in Sagar Island. And I wanted this to be a mystical journey. And the Ganga is all about mysticism. Is it just a river of water that people just almost stupidly and by rote just pray there for the sake, because it feeds India, the Eastern Gangetic Plains, like how the Nile feeds Egypt? Or is there something about it that does have a mysterious element, or godlike or ethereal element? So I wanted to bring that out of the book. Is there something to it? And I think it does come out in the book. So that's why Calcutta.
And
there's a museum there. I wonder if you went to the museum, right on the banks of the Hooghly.
Yes.
There's a museum, which is a museum. It's also a sort of a tribute to all the people who left in India. And there's a register that is maintained.
Yes.
I wonder if you.
I did. I went with my nieces.
Yeah.
Now I'm one of those people that hammer the next generation.
So.
Culture and tradition. So I went there, I made them sign, stamp, to sign there that their names are Mishti and Mihara, and I made sure that they understood their roots. It's a monument. It's a monument.
Yes, it's a monument with all the names of.
I'm surprised you even knew about that. There are not many. I don't mean that as an insult. But not anyone from India really knows about the indention.
Aman, you have to meet many more. You have to attend many more.
It's been my experience because we have not been given the respect that Indians have traditionally given to American Indians in America or NRIs in USA, in UK, Australia. We were treated as third class. We were treated. I have experienced that, being treated as a third class citizen in India by Indians when they realized I'm from, and they don't say South Africa, they say Africa. Africa. Yeah, because Africa is one big country. They don't really understand. There's different countries within there. It's just you've been to Africa, so they picked a jungle. There's lions running around, and then and then if you know a little bit more, then it's about the South African Trinity. But we don't get that level of awe that is given to the Indians who go to the UK and the USA, and that upsets me.
Yeah, I suppose that is a very valid point.
I mean, you see it in your matrimonials. I mean, green card. There's a section called green card. UK brides. I don't think I've ever come across South people want to come to South Africa as matrimonials.
Well, that's coming from a personal standpoint. Aman is looking for a bride for the longest time that I know of.
I'll say my bride later.
Okay, coming back to the story of Milan. Milan, I find personally deeply flawed. And probably that's the reason why he embarks on the journey of self-discovery. Why, as a writer, and this is something that I feel is deliberately sketched by writers who delve into spirituality. Why is it important to have a very deeply flawed character, take that journey of discovery and self-discovery and then attain that spiritual?
Yeah, if you look at our epics, for example, Ramayana, written by Valmiki, he was a highway robber. But that's what the history says. And he evolved to become a writer of one of the greatest epics ever written. Tulsidas was, who wrote, people say he's a reincarnation of Valmiki. They say, I think it was in the 1600s that he wrote Ramcharitmanas, which was a more poetic form of the Ramayana. And apparently he wrote the Hanuman Chalisa when he was in a spell of sexual depravity, and he used that Hanuman Chalisa under divine inspiration to cure himself of that. I think there was, from what I've read, he crossed the river to go and see his wife, who had gone and stayed with her own parents for a while, and he grabs onto a tree, and she comes out of the outside of his house, her parents' house, and she says, what do you want with this bag of bones and flesh? And he feels so embarrassed about it. He swims back across the Ganges, goes to his home, and he starts to meditate on it, and that's how he developed the Hanuman Chalisa. Not many people admit it, but this is the history behind it. So yes, all of them, I think, they have some flaw. I have some. The reason I have become fairly spiritual in comparison to my compatriots is because of my flaws. Milan is a very lustful character, but at the same time, I also think most men are. And I think it's just that they subdue it, and with him it's out there. And I think it's even in the women, but it's just society has trained them not to talk about it openly as men. So whether he is flawed or just more aware of his flaws, I think that's where you and I differ.
No, but how do you define a flaw? How do you define a flaw?
Well, society creates the idea of what a flaw is, isn't it? I mean, if you are sexually depraved, but you're not enacting it, then is it a flaw, or is it just you suppressing and you doing something fantastic? You have a flaw, but you suppressed it. You have a desire to drink alcohol, but you're not doing it. Is it a flaw? Or is it a power? If you get what I mean. Because you have suppressed some desire. So, ultimately, Virat even goes to the Osho commune in Pune, and he questions the Osho commune. Is finding God all about sexual liberation, as Rajneesh tried to preach? Whereas other Swamis would say, no, it's about the repression of your sexuality and enhancing your ojas power. So how can you have Swamis giving contradictory advice, if you get what I mean? I mean, Rajneesh,
Swamis can always give contradiction. There's no monopoly over truth.
Yes, exactly.
There's no monopoly over it. And I think that's the beauty of Hinduism. That every Swami, every time you read the Gita, every time you read a text, the stage that you are in, the number of times you read it, you will come with your own answers.
Yes.
I think that's the beauty of it.
So coming back from the story to you, and since it's a journey quite parallel to your own, we go to Uttar Pradesh. We reach Uttar Pradesh, and that is where Milan has his own experiences, but you have had significant experience of finding your roots. I would not like you to tell the audience about that as well.
So, will I be given an indulgence?
course, because I understand it's very personal to you. It's a personal journey that you.
So my father's grandfather, my Pardada, left Allahabad in 1874. And my Nana left a little bit later. He was only a 3-year-old child in 1906 from Geelong. So I first went to my paternal village. And the way the British had pronounced it was when you landed in Durban, the port, as they're filling out the ship register to say, where are you from? So the village that was written down was Kora Tiwari Ka Purva. Kora Tiwari Ka Purva, which was in the sub-district of Handia, which was in Allahabad. So when I went there, I'm looking for any village called Tiwari in Handia. Here's my friend there, Bhavesh was filming. We went everywhere looking. Everywhere there was. The problem is, whenever there's a family with the surname Tiwari, they call that Tiwari Pur. So there were about 6 or 7 different Tiwari Purs within the sub-district of Handia, within the district of Allahabad. The last one we came to was called Pure Tiwari. And when we went there, I saw literally the Ganga flows astride the village. And besides having a feeling of, this is probably waiting, because I just had that feeling. But whether it was my mind lying to me because I was desperately holding on to my ancestors' past, or whether it was, the real thing, I can't tell you that. But I remembered my father who passed on telling me from his memory of what his grandfather told him about Ganga Kinare. And so there was the banks of the Ganga. And that was the only village that had Tiwari in it. That had river flowing past it. And then when I spoke to the Sarpanch, the headman, we became friends, we still keep in touch. And he told me the village was originally called Kurd Tiwari Purva. But the river flooded and it separated the village. So there's Kurtpur and then there's Tiwaripur. So that's how it was. The British called it Kora Tiwari Ka Purva. So that's how it got corrupted. Even my surname Maharaj is not a surname anywhere else in India, but you find in Trinidad and all these Indian countries, because when they landed, they were wearing the Genoa string, the Pandits. So, the translator was, when the British officer asked, who's that? He'll say, oh, Maharaj hai. So the surname was written as Maharaj. But my correct surname, I only found it out 4 years ago, is Dubey. Finding my mother's village was more interesting because I had met my Nana, and he used to tell me the stories that his father told him. When he went back in 1972, they chased him out of the village because they thought he was coming to the land. So it was a lot more rustic. When I went, I think we went in 2019 to do some rituals for my mum, and they were very welcoming. But even then, they came from the village called Kusmara, within this district of Geelong. And we only found it because in the ship list, they put the Tana, which is the village, the closest village that has a police station. And in the archives, it was called Ren Roar, which is what the translator had said, and the British officer wrote it down. Only when I found the third Osmara, and they said it's next to the village of Rendar, that we found the right Osmara. So I had to triangulate it that way and understand that it was about pronunciation. So my mother's side village, I was much closer to my mother. We found the property, and the only thing that was standing was the prayer wall. Everything else had caved in. So there's a shrine wall there that has lasted 120 years. So I've asked the village council, the panchayat, that I want to build a library cum clinic in the village as part of my gift to the village itself and in the memory of my family.
Storytelling is such a powerful medium of also, sharing history in a lot of ways, and that's how I think that was the first part of you starting on this journey.
Exactly.
Finding Interestingly, there is a friend Milan has, quite like Bhavesh Ji here, called Birju. And I would like you to share something more about that character and how important it was for Milan to have someone along, to accompany him on his journey.
So there's a lot of twists and turns in the books. There's a lot of red herrings, and that's why it took me 3 months to write this novel. I wrote 1,200 pages, and it took me 16 years to edit it down to 400 pages. And I reached the point that I hated reading it because I was reading it every month, and over 16 years it's about 96, 100 times. So I got irritable about it. And there are other reasons as to why I was not releasing it, besides being a perfectionist. Bilju is kind of a foil to what Milan is, like a doppelganger in German, doppelganger. You know, and whenever Milan wants to sound something out, he's got his friend sleeping next to him, actually on the floor. And he's a strange character. He's like renounced the world. He just wears kurta pajama. He eats only fruit. He's like a fruitarian. And he's what Milan desires to be desireless, if that makes sense. And he accompanies Milan because nobody else will accompany him on this journey because it's intrinsic to Milan. So Bilju is there to observe him as a third person and to give views via as a narrator almost, although it's not Bilju talking, but it's Bilju viewing and unfurling what is happening. So he's there to provide that kind of background.
From Biju, why don't we move to Maya?
Oh yeah.
What a fantastic person. I mean, Kashmiri, Iranian,
Yes.
Western.
How did you
know,
come
I mean-
on sketching that character, and why bringing you know, make her
And
come from
Maya, the
Kashmir?
perfect.
Yeah.
Maya, the real, Maya, the illusion. Maya, Maya.
I see you've read the book. Going full. So there's a contrast between the woman that Milan meets in India. Calcutta, he meets a very realistic woman. She's a college lecturer. He shacks up with her for 2 weeks. And she's a contrast to this idyllic view of what a woman should be. And I'm going to be open. It's my view of maybe at the ripe old age of 50, I'm not getting married because I've got this idyllic view of what a woman should be, and it's probably very patriarchal. And she was soft. I won't say she was the most. She was cast as a doctor. She wasn't the most intelligent person as what Arpana in Bombay was, in Calcutta was. Arpana gave him that sense of wit and the repartee he had in her. But Maya, in a sense, gave him that nurturing, loving softness that he desired that he never had. And whilst many women feel that men look to them for having that sort of, I must watch my words here, that sense of equals, it was Maya that he fell in love with because of the nurturing quality that he saw. And I believe if you dig a man hard enough, no matter how intellectual he is, he'd rather have that nurturing quality in a woman than that intellectual quality that may match his. And a lot of people have shot me down for this, but I refuse to back down on it because I can only be true to my own experiences.
And then we move a little further and come to the table. That is where.
That's where we are.
Yeah, that's where we are, and that is where I think you should answer the next question that I have, as in why. Because I don't think Uttarakhand was really a part of the historical journey that the forefathers.
It was. Uttarakhand was part of
Uttarakhand was almost part
Part
of
of
me.
UP, yes,
And Rishikesh,
yes.
Haridwar,
Yeah,
I mean the Ganga, Jyotri, that is, I mean, it is somehow built into the moment you
Right.
talk of Ganga,
Mhm.
I mean Gangotri is there. The moment you talk of Ganga, the Himalayas, Shailputri, I mean this whole thing will be there.
Absolutely, yeah.
There are a few, I would say, if I can call it, hill descendants.
Uttarakhandis, okay.
Uttarakhand is there. You can make it out from the features. The eyes are a little bit more narrow, and I don't mean that in a negative way. It's a very attractive thing. So you can make out there are people who came out from further north in former UP, but very few.
But my question was more in pertaining to the spiritual part of it,
Yeah.
as to what takes Milan to the God.
Yes. Well, his initial aim was, until he found his forefathers' villages, was he wanted to find a blood kinship. But without knowing that he was going to find it, his aim was to go, which I'm actually doing again tomorrow. I've tried before, but I failed. I want to go see the pandas in Haridwar. Now, the pandas for those of you who don't know, are special types of priests that keep track of family lineages going back centuries. And apparently they have it in their head.
No, they have it in the
They have it.
They have
So,
it.
okay, so you can help me on this. So I want
No,
to
you see, because every family has his or her own panda, right?
Yeah.
And no panda will I mean, for instance, you go there, the panda will ask you, where are you from, what is your caste, right? So if we have Khatris from Punjab, they'll say Khatri, Chopra, Kapurthala,
Yeah.
and there will be just one person who has that record. Nobody
Yes.
else will have it.
Exactly, yeah.
So probably when you go there, you will say Dubai, Allahabad.
Yes.
You know, and then there will be one panda. There will be only one panda who will have that.
Who will have it. Okay.
Nobody else can have. Nobody else can have. And then when you go there, you actually will find that they would have recorded that, you know, who all came there, whether they came just for just for just for a visit, or they came because there was some death in the family. So all this will be recorded.
No, so I'm hoping in this 3 or 4 days that I'm in.
No, you will get it. You should get it. If it's there, you will get it. So they'll actually find out Dubai, Allahabad, and then they'll find out who all have come there.
That's my next adventure.
So you were talking about women people
Yeah.
that you're doing.
So his aim was to go to find them, but he always believed, like he said, it was all about the river. Was the Ganges going to elevate him or remove this angst from deep within him? Because he felt, no matter what experiences he had, what moment came in his life, but he was always destined to be sad. And I'm the kind of person, I think I overdid the sadness in the literature, but at the same time, there's a lot of joy and there's a lot of humor as well, very guttural humor as well. But ultimately, it's written in the sort of ethos of what you would find with the Dickens or Thomas Hardy. I love their literature. To me, those were the real writers of the times. So he came here with the idea of going to the source and finding out if he's going to have that spiritual vision that's lacking in his intellect, for every one of us. And will God give it to him? That is his whole aim. And he's almost pleading for it.
It is also a journey of, strengthening your own identity and coming to the current times. How do you view that in the Indian community in South Africa? I mean, how clued are they into their own history and their sense of identity coming from India?
They all well aware of our indentured rules. Not everyone will take it to the X level, the nth level that I did of going to my villages and trying to find my ancestors, contemporaries who have my bloodline. There are a few who are. Not anyone will just start reading. I used to go to the archives and start digging stuff out from our government archives. I think, like all Indians in the UK and the USA, they've become equals in the sense that we've lost that sort of cultural attachment, even though now India is so available to us. So most of the kids nowadays, the whole thing is about Bollywood. That's culture. And in a way it probably is, because culture gets celebrated in 1 or 2 generations, it does become culture, doesn't it? It evolves. But when I listen to people singing in South Africa, I don't like it. And that's going to be put onto my Facebook, this video. Because they haven't been trained. So they'll sing bhajans and it's not being sung with sur, because there's been no training. But there are people in South Africa who can sing, but they came to India to be trained. There are people in South Africa who can do kathak, but they have to come here to do it. Otherwise, people take chances and just dance like that. And then I look at, for example, on ZTV, is Dance India Dance, and I see 5-year-old kids dancing, and I think, oh God, look at them and look at us. The way they speak the Hindi, the way their craftsmanship, their talents, and we are completely, even our writing, and I'm going to boldly say, I think I'm one of the few writers who are able to craft a story that is worthy of being published. A lot of people just take chances, especially, this happens with women. I have a lot of women coming to me. I have a sad tale to tell. I want to write a story. Okay, what do you want to write about? Mom divorced. My husband treated me badly. So how is that different from probably 80% of divorces out there? Everyone thinks their life has been so remarkably bad that they can write a story about it. But I'm sorry, having a remarkably bad life does not mean you're a great writer. It's about how you craft the tale. You must be able to speak about this glass of water, for a couple of pages, but still keep the reader hooked in that. That is the art, and we don't have that. But in terms of topping, I mean, we're 1.5% of the population. Without fail, we are topping the classes in universities and schools, and that's typical of Indians anyway. And that's caused a lot of, I'd say, resentment. It is there. And like how Hitler used the Jews of Germany to galvanize the Germans against it. We've had those cases where there's been rioting. It happened in 1949, which is covered in the book. It happened in 1985, and recently in 2021.
Yeah, but you also have characters like Mr. Gupta and the others who go there.
Oh yeah.
The system. Mr. Gupta incidentally is from a place close by Saharanpur. Mr. Gupta also did a marriage in Oli, which the High Court had to say, what the hell are you doing? And that was done by
ostentatious.
Very ostentatious. And in any case, so I think let's open it up for questions. Let's open it up, for any thoughts, comments, I think we have 5-10 minutes and then we open it up. Yes, ma'am. I know you're ready to do it.
Okay, actually, so you mentioned, you mentioned that the protagonist is seeking almost spiritual vision, purpose, if you might call that. So, is that does that come from some personal seeking or some personal thirst that you have for a vision yourself, or is it just independent of the character?
Of course, I like I said, every one of us believes. Nobody can say, I've had the most wonderful life without any negative experience or sad experiences. I mean, you ask the mother who's lost a child before her, or the father who's lost a child before him, or someone who's lost a parent. Death is a gut-wrenching thing. But you have to carry on. Everyone has to go through it, through losing someone. And when I looked at my own life, although I made a success of it, it was always much harder. I had to claw through the air with a lot more effort than the person who it came easily to. Whether it was in school, it was fine. When it came to the intellect, I was fine. But when it came to climbing in my career, I was in corporate. I had these 3 degrees right up to PhD levels. But there were guys my age who had just turned 30. I'm driving a Toyota. They some of them driving a Porsches and Ferraris and so forth, with standard 8 education or a grade 10, or I don't know what you call it here. How do I explain that? Why is it that I have gone this long route and they are making the money? Why is it that I have to try harder and get lesser? So all these things, when you start questioning these things within you, there's an evolution. And that happens in the mind, not just in the heart, it happens in the mind. And you start questioning why. Why is my karma like this? And you want to know why. Is there a way out to dissipate that? And that is why I started writing about it. Because you have these, what Oprah would call these aha moments. And I guess I had that aha moment, or light bulb moment.
Yes.
Yeah, I'd like to ask you something personal. You seem to have this great wish to know about your past, your roots, so to say. You really want to find out where you came from and the family. Is it special to you, and why? And does it happen to most people who go abroad?
I think most people are just living their life. They don't care. It's about how much of money am I going to make, and it's keeping up with the Joneses. Like I said, he's driving the Merc. I must be driving the Mercedes as well. And the Indians in South Africa live a very comfortable. I would say 50% of them are upper middle class. They live very comfortable lives. The thing is, when you're comfortable, you don't evolve, as I said there. And this new generation don't care. The idea of culture, maybe they'll celebrate Diwali because it's fun. You get new clothes, you get to swank around. Or going to a wedding, you get to wear new clothes, or you're getting the latest design from the latest designer or the best designer in Bombay, and you might even take a trip. A lot of people from South Africa, when they're getting married, they take trips to Bombay to buy the clothing for the wedding. It's like a big thing, and you don't take the whole kutum and go, and it becomes a holiday. That's what culture has become. Yes, we eat all our hands. Most of us eat. Look, there are some people who eat roti with a fork and knife. I think it's ridiculous. How do you eat roti with a fork and knife? But it is there. But all of us eat curry about 3 or 4 times a week, because without curry, I'll have withdrawal symptoms after 3 or 4 days. There's only so much of English food that you can have, because masala is addictive. But it becomes difficult to be embroiled in Eastern culture unless you are doing the meditation and so forth. So to reach that point of awareness, you've got to take those steps, and it takes effort. People don't want to take the effort. They want to come home, they want to eat, bath, and get in bed and watch Netflix. That is why it is so fantastic that you guys have this love for literature. My book has done better in India than in South Africa itself. 90% of the people who bought my book in South Africa were probably my relatives and friends. And probably of that 90%, maybe 10% read it. Because there's no demand for literature. Things have changed, but you guys have that thirst for literature.
You see, but one of the things, you want to make it into a film. You've already thought of Nawazuddin Siddiqui and Diya Mirza as the character. So maybe that might happen. But
I've done a pitch.
Can I try answering your question? Because I think there is something which we share in terms of our personal journeys of finding our roots. I think deep, unfathomable loss directs you to start, on that journey of questions, and that, and that is where I think it started with you when you lost your mother. It started for me when I lost my father. They are Uttarakhandis who were always, I was born and brought up in Delhi. The only trips we used to take were during our summer vacations, long time ago, and after reaching a certain standard, that also stopped. But it was when I lost my dad that I started on that journey of rediscovering who I am and where we came from and what he achieved and attained in life and what he did, and to be thankful. In a way, be thankful to him and to the powers above, So I also embarked on that journey of discovering my roots in my village, my ancestral village, and that's how I think we got talking about this book initially about 2 years ago when Aman reached out for help. So I think that might answer your question, that it's a deep loss, I think, which actually, pushes people to start.
To want to understand who that loss
Exactly.
is better. It's very, very insightful. Very nice.
So my question might be a little hypothetical, but I'm just thinking, because you started by saying that it's the people who went to and maybe I didn't understand so correctly, that people who went there haven't got the kind of respect that others who went to Australia, etc., got. I'm just thinking, suppose you got that respect, would you feel that sadness and take this entire journey?
Absolutely, because that journey was, the loss was internal to me. Deepika was talking about the loss of a parent. I can't even think about it. To me, my mom is gone on a long holiday. If I think about it, I think I'll go mad. So if people see me on my social media, I will never ever talk about any loss whatsoever. I'm just ha ha he, that's all they see. Maybe suppressing it is like a cancer that you start developing in your stomach, but it is the only way I can deal with it. But yes, regardless of that, I was told.
I think the point that she was making is that because when you're not successful, or when you're not getting the social recognition, and you're looking for it outside. So what if you had that recognition when you were there? So maybe then that quest would become less. For instance,
Possibly.
a
And I'm just
very
wondering whether
successful,
the angst.
I mean, like the very successful Americans, for them to want to come back and discover their roots, perhaps they would, perhaps they would not. Perhaps a personal question. Sorry, yes, Maria.
Before that, I can just answer. Yes, I am not very well liked in my own community, and it's been like that. I don't look like the underdog. and people support the underdog. I'm the 6'4" giant amongst Indian men who are generally about 5.5 feet in South Africa. There's no Punjabi men who went there who are as big as I am. So men naturally didn't like me from my school days. Boys didn't like me, they didn't take to me. And you know, if you hit the biggest guy in school, suddenly you're the powerful, you know, it's all about might when you're in school as a young kid. And as big as I am, I can't fight. I just don't have that mentality, I don't have that level of aggression. So part of my rejection by my own society back home, because they saw me as being elitist when I wasn't, made me go on this journey. So you are right.
I just wonder, since you grew up as an Indian, then you're not aware of the basic philosophy, like when you lose somebody that he's not really dead. That and this kind of what is really important in life, that it's not money. Ultimately, no, that you have to have this contact with your inner self, and you didn't hear about this as
No, I'm well aware. Yes, we're well aware that there's no death of the soul, but I mean, it doesn't take away the missing of a person. That's going to always be there.
I don't think that, affluence or recognition really would, not allow you to take that journey, or you would not think of taking that journey. Because I think that is something, as Maria is trying to, say, is that it's very internal in nature of a person to embark on something which is spiritual, more spiritual. In management also, when actualization in the hierarchy of needs, self-actualization is at the top after you've covered everything from ST up until ST. So I think,
you gotta have divine wisdom to understand that. That is something only the man above or wherever he's omniscient.
I think you're destined to have that divine.
Yes. I think we're in that train and the train is going to take us there, but we can run in that train in different directions, but we still going to get to that same destination.
Yes, one or two more questions and then we suppose time is the only thing that is over.
So, what did you have any expectation on how it would feel to actually rediscover yourself, and actually did you rediscover or find a closure or that you were seeking, or is it just as mystical as the story?
I think as you go along, you get peaks into spirituality, peaks into understanding what God is there. But ultimately, to reach that point, you have to be fully realized. You got to have what we call the revelation.
So there's no feeling that comes even on the journey, or is there?
I've never had a euphoric feeling. Maybe for me to have that euphoric feeling, which he tries. In Goa, he tries LSD to have a euphoric feeling, because a drug, a chemical substance, can give you a feeling of euphoria. Because he's looking for that. I myself have never tried LSD, but I can't say I'm unopposed to it. But after 50 years of never even smoking in my entire life, I don't think I'm going to go try the drug route. But no, I haven't had a euphoric feeling.
So any one of our young friends? Yes, come.
Good evening, sir. I would like to ask you a question that you mentioned that your forefathers and the previous generations, they left India very early in the 18th century. So I would like to know that how do you people keep that tradition, that Indian tradition alive in a foreign country like South Africa?
Okay, so I'm going to give you a response that many people won't like me to say, but apartheid kept our traditions alive because we stayed, as per apartheid was this idea of separateness. You had to stay in your own neighborhoods. So Indians were forced to stay together. So if you have a high enough critical mass of people staying in the area, you're going to retain the culture. And for example, if I may just justify it, look at Diwali, right? We celebrated with firecrackers. Right up to 1994, we were staying in our Indian areas. Lighting firecrackers was perfectly fine. No one got upset. Muslims were fine with it, Hindus were fine with it, and Christians, I'm talking about Indians now, of Indian descent. The moment we moved into the white areas, or the more affluent areas, because apartheid was done away with, suddenly, why are you lighting fireworks? What about the environment? Oh, my dogs can't handle it. And I should fight with them. You know, your dogs can't handle it, but you eating meat, what's the difference? You know, I should take it to a different level. In fact, as recently as 2 or 3 years back, the estate that I stay in, it has its own set of rules, and fireworks was banned. I went to a constitutional lawyer, I got him to write a letter, and he said, what you're doing is illegal, they are doing is illegal. They can't ban fireworks during Diwali because the constitution recognizes the right to culture. And then people will start saying, you know, no, fireworks was never part of Diwali because fireworks was invented in China. They'll go into all those things. You know, why? You know, if it's celebrated once or for more than 2 generations, it is part of your culture. So a lot of people take their chances, but what I'm saying is, to answer your question, it was the segregation itself that kept our culture alive. So it had, funnily enough, apartheid has a positive side effect, if that makes sense.
Yes.
Hello. So my question is a little bit related to your personal journey. So when you came back and you tried to connect back to your roots, and I believe, like as you said, your entire family moved there. So before you, was there anybody in your family also who felt that? And while you were on your journey here, you know, trying to get back in touch with your roots, was there something that you wanted to share with them, like specifically your mom, that you were very close to her? Like while you were connecting back to the roots, something that you wanted to tell them?
See, one of the reasons maybe because the generation behind my parents, their generation couldn't do it, was I could indulge myself. I had the money to do it. Because what I'm doing is indulgence. What they had to do was make sure they put food on the table. So I had that extra money to do these things, if you get what I mean. So, you know, so it's not about just the will, it's about the means as well, and I had the means. So I'm sure they would have wanted to do it, but the fact that I went back to my Paradada's village, when my own Dada never went, if you get what I mean. If you think about it, it's illogical but remarkable at the same time. But it's because he was working as a laborer on the farm, earning a couple of shillings. How the hell is he going to even think of going back to India? Whereas I could just hop onto a plane and come to India and do whatever I need to do.
So one more thing, and I think that may be the last thing. In terms of economic development, you far outstripped those of your extended family.
Yes.
So in a way, you know, over 2 or 3 generations, those who left this place, they have done much better off economically and financially, you know, than those who stayed behind. So actually, we never know what is right and what is wrong, who has been more successful. That's something that we never know. But thank you very much, Aman. Thank you very much, Deepika.
Thank you, sir, for giving us this opportunity.
And as usual, I'll tell you to recite one of your slokas in the Gita. Any one of your slokas, because she is, I mean, I really admire the way she's sort of remembered most of the Gita by heart, and she has a shlok for every occasion. So,
No, you always put me in a tight spot.
good, I'm glad, because then someone can put you in a tight spot.
Okay, I will.
This time we are ready.
No, I'm not ready. I'm not ready. I will have to.
Okay, but till she finds the shlok, I mean, you read the Gita many times. You've enjoyed reading it.
Yes.
So what is your favorite aspect of it? What particular aspect of the Gita have you liked the most?
There's one slok, I can't say it word for word, but it's where Arjun is, lying at he's so out of it. And he's lying not lying there, he's
Given up
He's
his job, right?
dejected and he's given up. Yeah.
And it's about his mind, and he's telling Krishna, or is Krishna telling him, that the mind is more turbulent than the wind.
Yes. And Vimam see that it's like a boat which is.
Yes, that's exactly. I don't remember the exact word, but to control the mind is more difficult than controlling the wind, or something like that. And to me, that is absolutely true, because when your mind is going into that tilt,
That whirlwind.
no, yeah, exactly. There's not even a hurricane can match what is going on in your head.
This is so interesting. You brought that up, and that's the exact stroke that came to me.
Yeah, I'm divine.
Yeah. It's the chapter 18, verse 20. I'll try to sing. I'm not very good at it, but I'll try to sing. Pravrittim cha nivrittim cha karya karye bhaya bhaye bandham moksham jaya vitte buddhi sa partha satviki. It means, this is when Arjun is dejected and Shri Krishna is asking him to be fearless, and he's explaining through different verses as to what fearlessness means, and that's when he says that, oh Arjuna, that intellect that knows what is righteous action or karma, mark, and cessation of unrighteous action, what ought to be done and what ought not to be done, fear and fearlessness, bondage and liberation is sattvic. So that's where he's talking about sattva, rajas and tamas. Yeah.
So thank you very much on this very nice talk. Thank you. I would also like to thank the Wow Cafe Ring.
Yes,
All
thank
the
you so
young
much.
volunteers.
It's been a
Are we
very
ready with our
pleasure.
gifts? Yes. You ready? This is for Aman. Do you give? Value words. May I request you, Mari, come with this?
It's such a pleasure to be receiving this review.
Thank you.
I will, you'll see me quite often.
Thank
Come,
you.
grab your copy with a signature. Yeah, you can sign my copy.
Oh, I've got a special pen.